glad I'm only 16.
Okay, we will open this March 5th Murray City Planning and Zoning meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone that's here this evening. And before we start, I'd like to introduce to you the folks that are here this evening. We have, I'm Phil Markham, I'm the chair. Scott Woodbury is the vice chair. Travis Ney, the commissioner. Marin Patterson. Have Sue Wilson, Lisa Milkevich, and Ned Hacker. And staff, we have Jared Hall and Zach Littlewood. Smallwood. Same thing. Sorry. I almost made it through. Susan will get a kick out of that when she hears that, so that's okay. All right. Before we get started this evening, I would like to go over just a few ground rules with you folks. We would ask you to silence any phones that you may have brought with you. And if you do have to take a phone call, please step out into the hall and take that, and then you're welcome to return. We have agendas. Do we have agendas on the table, Zach? They've been passed. Okay, they're on the table back there, so hopefully you have an agenda if you're interested. If you would like to speak, we ask that I will open a public comment period for you to speak. If you would raise your hand and wait to be recognized by me, then I will ask you to come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes to present any pertinent information about the subject that is on the agenda at that time. And we would ask you not to repeat things that have just recently been discussed and so forth. If an item is brought up and it's being repeatedly asked and that's the concern, I will ask that you move to a different concern or that. So just in the interest of moving the meeting along. Okay. So with that, I think we'll get started. And our first item tonight is some business items. We have approval of minutes for the February 6th and February 20th planning and zoning meetings. Has everyone had a chance to look at those?
Yes.
Okay. We had a few minor grammatical corrections that we discussed in our pre-meeting, nothing of substance. Those have been noted, and they will be taken care of. So I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the meeting, Planning Commission meetings held February 6th, Planning Commission meeting minutes from meetings held February 6th, 2020, and February 20th, 2020, okay, as written and as edited in our pre-meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay. I have a motion by Ned and a second by Travis to approve the minutes for the February 6th and February 20th meetings with the alterations as discussed in the pre-meeting. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next is conflict of interest. Do any of the members of the commission have a conflict of interest with any item tonight?
No.
Finally, approval of findings of fact, and we have two findings of fact this evening. One is for a Beautiful Fence Incorporated, and the other is for Utah Education Association office building. Has everyone had a chance to review those?
Yes.
Any corrections or concerns?
No.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the findings of fact for a conditional use permit for Michelle Castro doing business as A Beautiful Fence, and a motion for a conditional use permit for Utah Education Association office building with applicant Ashley Atkinson, Sequoia Development, and Brenda Pett from the UEA.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion by Sue Wilson, a second by Scott Woodbury, to approve the two findings of fact as read into the minutes. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right. We do have one change to our agenda this evening. Item number 4, a conditional use permit for the Duo Barbershop and Salon, LLC, has been withdrawn from the agenda this evening. The applicant withdrew that earlier today, so we will not be considering that at all. So if you are here with that, I apologize. We did not get notice that that was going to be withdrawn until very late this afternoon. So that brings us to item number 5, Spring Creek Cove Investments, LC, and they are seeking a conditional use permit and planned unit development review for a planned unit development project. And we are going to hear items number 5 and number 6 together. The presentation will be the same for both. However, we will take separate votes for each of those items. So we'll have a vote for the conditional use permit and then also one for a preliminary subdivision review. Okay, and Jared's going to present that to us tonight.
Thank you. And I appreciate the intro because that's the most important thing to get understood straight away, is that this is the first of 2 times that you will see this item as a planning commission. If the planning commission grants conditional use permit to move forward with the planned unit development and a preliminary approval, it will come back before you for a final approval. So there is still work to be done. But at this stage, we do, as a staff, feel like we've reviewed the preliminary information to the best of our ability and are ready to present it to you. So this project is located at 5091 South Wesley Road and 5050 South 1100 East. Project area is highlighted in red there. There are 3 properties associated with it. We have seen previous subdivision applications on this property before, as I think all of you have been here for some of those, or one or more of those at this point. None of those subdivisions have moved forward. So the current subdivision proposal is for, as we said, a planned unit development. And I think it's important to understand, first off, what a planned unit development means. So subdivision, everyone's familiar with, you carve land into lots that are for sale, right, for homes. In this case, the zoning that you can see there is R18, that's single-family zoning, 8,000 square foot lots. In a planned unit development, that's what's required for that. That's why we're looking at a conditional use permit, to allow that planned unit development. The Planning Commission is authorized to vary some of the different kinds of things we look at with subdivisions: front yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, width requirements, etc., as a part of a design that is meant to serve a purpose, to create open space, in this case, to preserve open space. So you will see, as you've seen in the site plan and in the preliminary plat, that the lots, although most of them, 8,000 square foot is the minimum lot size required here, almost all of these lots are greater in size than 8,000 square feet. Some of them are significantly greater in size than that. However, all of them involve some variation of setbacks and things like that in order to accommodate the large open space on the east end of the property. So we can get more into that in just a moment. So you can see the 15 lots arranged around the 2 cul-de-sacs there. Principal access comes from Wesley Road. Through this, there was a home on this lot previously. So the access comes down through Wesley Road and ends in 2 cul-de-sacs on the north and south to create access for these lots. Now the building pads for the lots, as you'll see on the next plan, are clustered around that road to stay out of a significant open space on the east end of the property. This is the Spring Creek. It's a designated wetland. We're looking at that as part of the subdivision. We'll talk about that in just a moment as well. But the use of the PUD subdivision, the planned unit development subdivision, in this case, was to cluster those same numbers of lots that would be allowed on this property anyway around that road and keeping them out of the wetlands to preserve that. So there was some question. We took several comments over the last week from neighbors and folks about the density here. It's too much density. It's more density than is allowed here. It's actually slightly less dense than all the properties around in the subdivisions. This is about 2.8 units per acre. A typical R18 subdivision, R110 subdivision is 3 to 4 units per acre. So this is slightly less dense, although it feels more dense because the homes have been clustered around that road to stay out of the wetlands. So just wanted to get that kind of...
Jared,
yes.
I neglected to mention that we did receive a couple of letters.
We did.
Prior to the meeting, and I have asked Jared in his presentation before this item finishes to address most of those items in those letters. So we will be addressing those. That doesn't mean you can't come up and express some concern for them, but I believe that a lot of the answers to those questions in those letters will be fleshed out in his presentation. So.
Thank you. So moving on from this one, just to see that, to illustrate that point we were just talking about, and maybe talk about the open space a little further. Planned unit developments are required to, if we're going to use those variations in the subdivision requirements, they're required to provide an open space. And that's why you see these home sites that are largely clustered around this access. Because of the nature of the property, we also, with planned unit developments, require, and we'll see some elevations here in a minute, we require that the builder provide us with the kinds of units that are going to go on these lots. A lot of subdivisions get subdivided and then the lots are sold to individual builders and you don't know until the home's going up what it's going to be like. That won't be the case with a planned unit development. Garbett Homes, it's the applicant here, will be building all of these, and as a part of the planned unit development subdivision, certain unit designs will be approved to accompany the lots and the subdivision. So, and they've been chosen largely to be lots that will be compatible with this kind of area where you have a steep slope and some limitations on the land that you can use. We also required and have asked for, and they've provided, home placement plans because the lots are kind of limited in their ability to be used. This does a good job of showing you kind of the open space on the east end here. I'm going to say west all night, just so you know. I'm going to continually call this east end of the property the west end of the property, but it is the east end of the property. This is the low side of the property and the Spring Creek running through there. That channel and the area around it will be preserved in a conservation easement that will be recorded along with this subdivision. So the subdivision HOA will own in common that area, but it will be in a permanent conservation easement. So no one can build on it. They can't decide, well, we don't want to do that anymore and carve it into lots. That conservation easement will protect that wetland in a way that it's currently not being protected. And with limited access to it, admittedly, but that might also limit some of the pollution that's coming into it as well. There is a small access provided down to the wetland area, or the most accessible part of it in here, by a gravel path that's planned between those two lots. I want to say it's lot 14 and 15. Am I doing the wrong one? Yep, right there. One other thing to be aware of in looking at in the plan, one of the questions that was brought up was storm drainage. This is open area right now. This is vacant property, and there was some concern that the increase in storm drainage would damage the creek or would damage that wetland or harm that wetland. So two things with that regard. This is a Corps of Engineers area, so the Corps of Engineers will have to approve and sign off on the plans. That'll have to happen before we can approve it for final and subdivide the property. The Corps of Engineers will have to accept that conservation easement, that it's large enough to protect the wetlands, and they'll also have to sign off on the way the storm drainage is being outfalled to the creek. You can see that easement right here. This slope is such that there's no way to provide storm drainage on this property for development of this property unless it goes down to this creek. That's going to mean for Garbett that they're going to have to fully treat the storm water as it outfalls to the creek, to that wetland. The Corps of Engineers will require that, so will our city engineers department, the state DEQ, and the Salt Lake County Flood Control folks. It'll be reviewed by all of those entities. All of those entities require permits for this kind of development, and all of those permits will have to be in place before we final a subdivision and record that subdivision. So you'll see more of that coming forward as we move from preliminary to final, if that's the case tonight. There are two other open space areas that are created, and I'll come back to these other plans. Just real quickly to show you, if you hadn't noticed it before, you can see really clearly in the topo here that grade down to the creek bed. So there's a lot of steep slope there. The home sites are going to be up at the top of that slope and largely staying out of it to minimize the disturbance there. The property also, in the entrance to the property doesn't provide enough room for lots, and so the road coming in, the proposed road coming in, will have landscaped areas that are parcel A and parcel B on the plat. That'll also be landscaped areas that are owned by the HOA and maintained by the HOA. It also provides some areas for snowplow, for snow removal if it's necessary. There are sidewalks alongside the road throughout Wild Spice Cove, Wild Spice Lane, sidewalks and park strips. This is a good opportunity to maybe talk about also the setbacks that we talked about, how planned unit developments are allowed different setbacks as approved by the Planning Commission. We are recommending that these have been plotted appropriately, and that's for a couple of reasons. There are cases where, to keep the homes out of the steeper slopes, they've been pulled forward toward the street a little bit more than you typically see. A typical R18 subdivision has a 25-foot front yard setback from the back of the sidewalk. This will be 15 in some cases. Most cases, I think the smallest setback shown was 15 for a front yard. However, none of the garages are closer than 20 feet to that sidewalk, to the property line, so that you have a maximum area provided for parking off the street. The street is technically wide enough under our engineering standards to park cars on the street as well, so we shouldn't see parking problems up the hill and into Wesley Road. There's 2-car garages on all of these home plans. And again, we approve the home plans with it. Nobody gets to come in after and say, well, I don't want a garage. I'm not going to do that. These will all have garages approved with them, 2-car garages and driveways that will accommodate 2 cars in the driveways as well. That's in addition to the roadway being wide enough. This is a standard 49-foot public right-of-way for single-family neighborhoods. That's our typical roadway standard. I think Wesley Road is wider than that by 19, 20 feet. But this particular road will be 49 feet wide, accommodate all of those kinds of improvements. These are landscaping plans for those 2 areas on the front, and then typical landscaping plans that Garbett will install when homes are built in those front yard areas. We spoke about the grading and the drainage there. There are utility questions. There were utility questions in the letters that came to us, and we've been asked some of those questions about the power lines in the area. This is Rocky Mountain Power. Murray Power's involvement so far, their comments to us in the review so far has been that they want to review the location of the streetlights, but Rocky Mountain Power will be providing those, and Rocky Mountain Power will be providing service to these lots. Rocky Mountain Power will have to provide a will serve letter for that. There was some concern from citizens that would affect their existing power, that it would cause brownouts, et cetera. Rocky Mountain will have to deal with all of that. If it means that extra service has to be brought in, then that'll be required for the subdivision. We'll know that moving from preliminary to final. Gas provision, it is being moved. There's an easement shown on the utility plan here for the gas line. Gas services provided to this property coming from the east should not affect gas service to the properties on Wesley Road. There's no reason to suspect that they would in our review thus far with the engineer. Questar, or I'm sorry, I don't know how long it's not been Questar, sorry. Dominion Energy will review the plat as well and have to sign off on that plan. Again, so we talked about how the units have to be controlled, the type of units that are allowed. There are several different plans attached to the plans, to the subdivision so far, because to try to accommodate those different lots and the different needs that those lots have, the buildable areas, and to give people in that same, with that limitation, to give people some choice as well. So there'll be several types of houses approved, and which exact one gets put on which exact lot might change, but all of the different home plans we feel like are appropriate. So you have elevations and floor plans shown here. I'm just going to quickly go through them. If people have interest in them, we can share that or refer them to Garbett. As we move forward to final, colors and materials have to be defined more clearly and provided to the Planning Commission so they can be attached to that final subdivision approval. We are recommending approval of the conditional use permit and the preliminary planned unit development subdivision, subject to a series of conditions. Most of them are coming from the city engineer's office and relate to other offices that need to review. And we try to make sure all those things can be answered before we come back for the final subdivision approval of the Planning Commission, or at least that they're answered to the extent that we know that they can be held off until recording. We do have, again, we mentioned color and material that needs to be provided. There's a homeowners association document attached to this subdivision that covers that conservation easement and guarantees that wetland gets protected and maintained in perpetuity. We've reviewed that. That'll be provided again to the Corps of Engineers and everyone that needs to sign off. Just as a reminder, there are 2 different approvals, 2 different requests before the Planning Commission. I wanted to quickly look at if you'll indulge me, I wanted to quickly go over the letters and make sure I didn't miss any big points that got asked. There was some question about sewer, and I should have addressed that with utilities. The sewer is going to go out to Wesley Road. That's going to require what are called E1 pumps for these homes. That means the sewer is going to have to be pumped uphill until it can gravity flow out with the rest of the utilities in the area. That shouldn't cause a problem for other homes in the area for sewer. But with that said, Cottonwood Improvement District will have to provide what's called a will serve letter for the subdivision. That means that they've looked at that issue and they can handle the capacity. If they need to upsize lines, they'll call that out to Garbett Homes as we come back for final. But in initial reviews, Cottonwood Improvement Sewer has not called out any problems with using E1 pumps for this property or for the extent of the number of lots. But that'll be further reviewed as we move toward final. The same goes for water. This is Jordan Valley Water. Water provision to the lots shouldn't be a problem. The channel, there was some concern about flooding, and I missed this when we were talking about the I'm going to go back. Well, I'm not going to go back because it's a long way back, but I will eventually. That channel where Spring Creek is needs to be cleaned up. The engineers asked for it to be cleaned up, and this is a careful kind of a process with the Corps of Engineers. You have to do it without disturbing too much, but it needs to be cleaned and dredged so that it can provide more storm flow, so that it can handle more water. There's more water in it right now than it should be handling, and that's bringing a lot of the problems that it creates. It needs to be dredged and cleaned to provide a better waterway and a better wetland. That'll be part of the requirements as well. That's in the engineer's requirements or required conditions of approval. There is the ditch in the area. There's an irrigation ditch in the area. They'll have to get approval from Tanner. I believe it's Tanner Ditch. Sorry if I messed that up, but Tanner Ditch will have to approve the subdivision plan as well. That'll require Garbett to work with them for piping the ditch under the plan that they have currently. If in the past we were able to, and we'll look into this as we go forward from prelim to final, in past subdivisions we have been able to provide connections where homes that are on Wesley Road wanted those connections to irrigation water that they've had access to in the past. We should be able to do that again, but that needs to be worked out with Tanner Ditch. So we'll make sure that's in place for final as well. I believe that's all of it. If you have any questions for staff at this point.
Go ahead.
Jared, there are a few things on there. Fault line, you did address density, but fault line, snow removal, car lights, park.
Right.
I think those were some water table.
There is high water table in the area. That's common in all of East Murray and a lot in West Murray as well. So that'll have to get looked at for each of the homes, but they're sitting on slopes to an extent that I'm not sure the water table will really be the issue, but foundation drains might be required. That'll all be looked at from engineering as well. I don't see the water table being a problem here necessarily for the construction, but Garbett's fought water table before. I think you guys know how to do that, so we'll look at that. Car lights, landscaping will, like I said, landscaping will be provided for the front yards of all of these homes as they're built, and then rear yards get installed afterwards. So there will be trees to buffer car lights and things like that as the project is built. There's also a fence planned around the property, except for the extreme east side where the waterway currently is. So there'll be a vinyl fence put around the property that should minimize some impact from headlights, et cetera. The fault line, I can't speak to the fault line. That would have to be in the geotechnical review, and we would rely on those geotechnical engineers to tell us whether this is safe or not.
Yep.
What was the last one you said?
Snow removal and
Snow removal.
sidewalks.
Snow removal is a challenge in every subdivision. This will be public roads, so Murray City will plow the roads. Sidewalks are the responsibility of homeowners to clear for snow removal. But there were comments about sidewalks in the area. So in the immediate area, this subdivision will provide the required sidewalks. We don't do subdivisions without sidewalks anymore. That has happened in the past. Looking at the aerial photography, there are sidewalks throughout a lot of the subdivision, but there are key significant areas where nearing the school, the sidewalks drop out of existence. It's very difficult to get sidewalks put in place 45 years after a subdivision has been put in. However, we will broach that topic with Public Works. The bottom line is it's not in the purview of this subdivision to provide those sidewalks that have been missing 3 blocks away for a number of years. But we will raise the issue since it's coming up with Public Works and see when we can program sidewalk installation up there. It makes everybody sweat in Public Works. You have to take property that people have come to consider their own and install sidewalks. It's never pleasant, but it's obviously pretty needed there when you look at the school, so we'll definitely bring it up. But again, not really attached to this project, but we appreciate getting the heads up on it.
And then just parks. There was multiple suggestions of a parks or wetlands or nature center.
And that's come up before, and it would. I wouldn't deny that that's not a bad thought. It seems to lend itself naturally to a conservation area like we're seeing here, and to a nature park or something like that. The city looked at that. We brought it up with the first subdivision we saw here about 5 years ago. I think it was about 5 years ago. The city parks department simply does not have the funds to acquire this property and turn it into a viable city park at this time anyway. So,
right. So Jared, to clarify on that, so the city would purchase the property at the market rate and then develop it and then have to maintain it. And as of right now, and in the past, there has not been sufficient funds in order to do that.
That's exactly right. Okay. We'd have to buy it at market value. We don't own it or control it.
Right.
And there's no land is very, very valuable in this part of the valley as well as every part of the valley, and we simply don't have the funds to acquire it and turn it into a park.
I think that's all.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Hello. I'm assuming the city has done this, but just to assure, we've checked with the school district and Twin Peaks. It's a minimal impact, but
Right.
Twin Peaks can.
That's a great, I'm glad you mentioned that, Lisa. Thank you. So planned unit developments, it's required to contact the school districts. And the Granite School District has already signed off and said they can handle the influx of students from the 15 homes without an issue. So,
Jared,
I appreciate it.
do you have any information as to why the previous projects that were planned in this location did not happen?
Not
Reasons
not
for it, or-
specifically, no. I don't really know. Can't speak to that. I'm sorry. I know that engineering costs on a site like this are significant, and it's not easy for the developers that were looking at it previously had taken it back from a bank, or had lost it to the bank. I forget, but there are monetary costs that Garbeck can maybe. I would venture to say that Garbeck can maybe deal with through economies of scale that other developers hadn't been able to until now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I have another question. So one of the comments was how these homes may have impact on the current resident homes in the area, and I don't know if you have expertise on that, or if you could address.
Do you mean on the
that.
value of the homes? Is
Yes.
That's a great question, and I don't really have a way to speak to what it might do to that, except to say that with values of homes, when the value of your home goes up because of appraisals, you have a benefit to that as well as a cost with property taxes. But that property taxes are going to be adjusted based on a lot of other things happening too, citywide and valley-wide as well. So it could have some impact. There are 15 homes. It'll take a while for that to hit, and we just can't say what it could be.
But you most likely could say it will not bring down the property value.
There's
Not
no
for
earthly
sure.
way I could see that it would lower property values. No, these are going to be expensive homes. It is a nice home plan. It does a lot of great things that people are looking for in that conservation area. I would imagine it would increase property values. Yes.
Anything.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you, Jared. Is
Now
the
I'll go back through all
applicant
those and
here? If you'd like to come up, please, and state your name and address for the record, and then give us any additional information that you would like.
okay. Starts with the preliminary, goes to site plan, and then to grading.
Yes, I was going to mention, we are considering both items at the same time right now. So
Yeah.
my first question to you would be, if you've had a chance to look at the conditions for both of the actions we will consider tonight, and are you able to meet those conditions if they are granted?
Yes, Chairman Markham, Jacob Ballstead, 273 Northeast Capitol Street. I reviewed the conditions and can satisfy them, and I can
Okay.
agree to them. There was one comment about setbacks and no window wells, and in our project in Wynwood, I think we had it so we could have window wells in one house and not on the other, and that may just need to be a clarification with planning. But I think in most cases, we're not going to have window wells on the sides anyway because they're walkout basements.
Okay.
That's something I think work with staff on.
Anything else you'd like to provide right now?
Jared did a great job. I don't think I have anything to add.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll be bringing you back up to answer some questions or concerns here after the public comment period. So
Wonderful.
sit tight. Thank you. All right. With that, I am going to open this meeting up for public comment. If you would like to address this agenda item, please wait to be recognized and then come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and we will have 3 minutes for you to present any concerns that you may have. All right. Any takers? Please, sir, come forward.
My name's Steve Strong. I live at 5096 Wesley Drive, which is going to be right straight across from where the road comes out. Just wondering about the headlights coming right into my big window in the front there as they're coming out, taillights when they're going in. And also, is the snow going to come across the road into my yard when they push it out or into my driveway? And then again, how many truckloads are they going to be bringing in and out of there as they're building this thing?
Okay. All right. We'll address those at the end of the comment period. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Please, ma'am.
I am concerned about two things.
Could I get your name and address, please?
My name is Barbara Nielsen. I live at 4941 South, 1021 East, which is the condominium complex north of this. And when previous people have come up, because we've had 2 or 3 people want to develop this, there's always been retaining walls that were required because there's such a steep drop off into our area. And I have not seen retaining walls addressed. And also, I heard him talk about too much water in the wetlands. And because we're downstream, this water that they get to flow better will flow into our property. And what is it, the unintended consequences of us receiving more water from the wetlands than we do now?
Okay.
That is it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Brent Plant, and I live at 1119 East, 5190 South, and I have 2 concerns. What are they going to do to protect the wetlands? All the wild places in this valley are going away because they seem to be so possessed about building. And I know it's all about money. It's not about friendship. It's not about the environment. It's about money. 2, that is a wild spot. There are all kinds of wild animals over there. Deer. Some of the biggest bucks, mule deer, that I have ever seen are right over there in that property. And I'm an avid bow hunter. I own property in Lambs Canyon. I bow hunt there every year, and I see bigger deer over there in that wild little piece of God's green acre than I do anywhere in Wasatch Front. Do people realize what it's like to look in a child's eyes and let them see what Mother Nature is all about? A few years ago, I used to work part-time for Murray City Parks and Recreation down at Willow Pond Park. What a treat and what an experience that was. We need to save places like that. Trust me, brothers and sisters, if this goes away, we lose. We lose. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay.
My name is Leah Garvey, and I live at 5065 Wesley Road. They're right behind me. I have a couple of concerns. One, he says he's going to put a vinyl fence around. They want to lower the land. If they lower the land, we can't have a vinyl fence. We need a retaining wall. For one mistake, that would be because we'd slide. 2, the park idea is not, I understand that in a couple of weeks you are voting on a budget for parks.
Okay, we do not. That's a city council
Okay,
issue.
but they're voting in 4 weeks for it. Mm-hmm. To earn money for a park that we would really appreciate around this area. On the east side, we have none. You've incorporated us, 15 years ago, and we have no parks. We have nowhere to walk except for at the school, which the kids walk through the dog crap. So we would like a park. We would like to have some land that the kids can go explore. That used to be when you were little, could explore. You can't explore anymore. It's not safe. This would be safe. It's all fenced in on Van Winkle and the trailer court. It's all fenced in. So there's no reason we can't have a park. The houses they want to put in behind us is high density, and yes, they're all around us. But if you look at the plan, there's like 2 houses per every lot we have. So you're having not 1 neighbor, but 2 neighbors behind you. So that is a problem for us too. The wetlands to me is a major, and dumping that water with the HOA. Who is in control of the HOA? What is their training with the HOA to do pumps? he says it'll be filtered. Who's training these people to filter the water? It only takes one contaminant. If you lower the land going down 3 to 6 feet, you will have Wesley Road dumping down the hill to their storm drain. Our water is now built to go into the ditch on, let's see, it's 1045 east, not the wetlands. If you put that in, you'll go down to the wetlands, and all that water from 5290 south down will go into that wetlands. It's not just their community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Max Reese. I'm the secretary of the Little Cottonwood Tanner Ditch Company. We're the ditch that runs along the west side of this property. We've entered into a contract with Pat Vasher, who owns this. He's the one that put together the Spring Creek Cove. There are easements that are already recorded, grants of right-of-way, pipe specifications, all aspects that the ditch company has agreed to. We have not been contacted by Garbett. Last June, I received a phone call from Jacob, and he said he would follow up. He didn't. February 22nd, he had set up a meeting at Murray Library, and the neighbors were invited, but the ditch company wasn't. And then yesterday evening, he leaves a message. I call him back today. I don't get him. We have not been contacted. He did state, I went to that meeting on the 22nd. He said they were going to drag it down 6 feet. I don't see any way that our ditch can continue pulled down 6 feet. Now, maybe they've got some idea, I don't know. But I don't see how it can happen. We've got people that use that water all along there. They've got to be able to get to it. There's no planning with the ditch. They have no approval from the ditch. And we will not be put in a position where we have increased liability because of their building. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Please, anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I have notes with a few things, and let's skip around just a little bit and just go through them all, and then maybe you can think of what you want to say. The basement heights.
Name and address, ma'am.
Lucy Beatty, 5053 Wesley Road. My home is adjacent to the property, okay? Their diagram shows that the property will go, the two houses that will be on that shelf, will go right to my property. But if they're going to go down 6 feet, then I need to know, and then also the water. I take water from that, which I've been granted, I've been paying for 6 years for that. Are they going to pump my water up to me from that ditch that goes down 6 feet? Because on the plot, that backyard goes all the way to my yard. It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, they say they've made you can park a car on those streets. I would love for this committee to go down to 7th West and 6600 South and drive through their subdivision. See those homes. There's nowhere to park a car on the street. Those streets are only 25 feet wide. And yes, they say, oh, you can park 2 cars, 2 in the garage and 2 in the driveway. But if somebody has a birthday party for a child, there is nowhere to park the excess. They need to put a parking lot in. The security light placement isn't very good, but that does, we'll handle that before. More green space, 6 feet. It's excessive cost for these homeowners, and these homes are nice, but they're not million-dollar homes, and they're not going to be million-dollar owners that are going to be able to handle the excess costs of pumping the sewer up and taking care of the wetlands. They are not going to handle anything. They're letting the city do the snow removal. They're letting the city worry about everything else, and these homeowners are going to have that burden. The average home probably would run between $350,000 and $400,000 at the most. They're bumper to bumper, 10 feet across. It's a nightmare down there. It's a nightmare down there. The security light's a problem for me because it'd be right in my backyard. I'd rather they put it over their own homes rather than right on the property line. Retaining wall is a wonderful idea that Leah had. And I think I've covered it. Oh, I have one more thing. When they drag out that 6 feet, they're going to go right into some lower trees. They're going to have to do some tree removal there. I don't think they're the ones that are the protected ones, but there's some pretty, trash trees that have grown in that area. I've been there since about 1963. So I've seen all the changes in it. So they're going to have a problem with a lot of traffic of tree removal besides having trucks come in and push that shelf out. Then I guess they're going to tamp it down so the basements don't crack. And we do get water in our basements on Wesley Road. When I bought that home in '63, the owner didn't tell me there was a problem with water. And I've had my basement flooded over and over again. The water table is extremely high. My neighbor next to me has a wall that keeps cracking, and his is culverted behind him, and yet there's a wall that cracks from the moisture in the ground. And he's not 6 feet lower. He's just street level. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm Max Parkin, 1103 East, 5190 South. I live 1/2 a block south of the entrance into this new community. I've been a strong advocate for this land for 60 years that I've resided in this home, for the city to acquire it and make it into a park. I think it's a grand place for a park, but the city has not acted for whatever reason. And I've been to these meetings over and over where other developers have been turned down apparently. I am, though an advocate for the park, I'm also an advocate for the improvement of the area and for the establishment of this new community. I think it'll be an upgrade for our community as well, but people have a right to develop the land that they own if it's done responsibly. And I would make that strong emphasis that these various complaints that have been made here should be all considered and evaluated and action taken where appropriate. It should be done responsibly. Now, there is a neighboring section of land just to the south of this new development, or potential development, which the city can still acquire and develop this land and some of the drainage area into a park. It won't cost the city as much as the whole area would. That would be a grand addition to our neighborhood, and we'd appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
They keep referring to this water as the ditch only, and it's not. It's loaded.
Your name and address,
I'm
please,
sorry.
ma'am. That's okay.
Jane Garvey, 5066 Wesley. They keep referring to it just as the water in a ditch, and it's not. We have artesian wells all throughout this land. We've even set up a camera and done the deer and watched them as they come to these artesian wells where they have the water available to them. The whole area is laced with artesian wells. You're going to have trouble with water no matter where you go. Cobble Creek across across 9th had a great big pond, and they couldn't take care of it, so they had to drain it, put it under the Van Winkle, and put it into what's the name of the creek? Anyway, they had to drain it and go under the road and put it into one of the city. No, it's not city. What is it? Oh, no, it's not Spring Creek. It's on the other side of. Anyway, this place is loaded. In front of the trailer park entrance on 5290 by the school, it was a swamp before they put those houses in, and they had to put drains in those. They went under the road and connect with our little creek at the bottom. I'm forgetting names. I don't speak well in front of people. But anyway, it's connected to this property's drainage system. I understand that the homes in the boy, I really don't speak well, but the homes in the the complex, the high rises. Yeah, Three Fountains just spent $22,000 getting the creeks cleaned out and the wells cleaned up so that they wouldn't flood in their area. My house is across the street from this property, and we still have occasional floods. But the property across the street that's right next to it gets water in it all the time. They don't even have a finished basement. When the property was up for sale, originally they put 5 houses in on our end of the road, and they couldn't keep the water out of them, so they sold to another contractor and raised the foundations 18 inches and built our houses. So it's by 2 different builders, but the ones that were original that have their backyards next to this ditch and to this property are having a dickens of time with water. The person can't put their, doesn't have any rugs. She had to take them out. She had to put the washer up on the next floor because it couldn't drain out of our way. One more thing is, as the road comes out onto Wesley Road is very crooked, and there's a place as you come onto Wesley Road that's very dangerous without any extra people on it. There's been 2 or 3 accidents because it makes such a curve on the road. And our subdivision, when it was put in, was slanted, so it went to a drain at the end of Wesley Road. It comes down Wesley Road and turns the corner, so it's an L-shaped road. And at the end, there was a big drain put in before the houses were put in to take care of the water. There is about, once a week, we get a flow of water, and I don't know where it comes from. But this water
10 seconds.
I'm sorry?
10 seconds.
Okay. This water will go around the curb. If they take the curb out to put the road, it will go around the thing and flood down through your houses. That will be another water problem.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sophia Palmer. I live at 3 Fountains East. And what this lady, I thank you for bringing that up about us having to build up the back of our property because the creek had flowed through, it overflowed and flooded. And it didn't cost $22,000, it cost $60,000. And we built a berm, and this has been about 6 years ago. And so now the berm is quite high, so it won't happen again. But it was quite an experience.
Thank you. Okay. Now, I'd like to see if we've got some other folks. So. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lynn Greasy. I own 5075 Wesley Road. So my property is the one that's right at Wild Spice Lane and abuts the development. So my property is also flooded. When we first bought the property, it flooded, which was in 2006. And we had to kind of regrade the backyard to kind of help with that. And then I think one of the other things that I've heard again and again is the issue with density. And so when you're looking at the way it's laid out now, it's the frontage, the footage, the square footage of the frontage for each of the properties. I don't know what it is for the proposal, but it seems at least a third narrower than the existing lots. I think if the density was a little less and it was more in line for the frontage of what's existing in the area, that might be more in line of what the current residents would feel appropriate for the community. And it wouldn't feel as dense. Because I understand that the lots are 8,000 square feet, but so much of that is in the back of the properties. Whereas the existing lots, it's more, a third of it is the front with the house, and then, the rest is in the back. So it just feels a little bit more proportion. The way these are now, it feels disproportionate with the rest of the community. So, and then I think that's it. Oh, and then what are the side setbacks? Because that hasn't really been brought up.
We'll have staff address side setbacks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Any takers? Yes, ma'am.
Donnell Reed. I live at 5248 South Wesley Road. I want to know what the HOAs do about parking on their streets. I heard there wasn't going to be any parking in there at night or whatever. Are they going to be covering Wesley Road? And then how are they going to do the walks? And there's snow removal on the streets if the cars are parked there. Because I know the trailer park down below does not allow anybody to park on their streets after dark. And that's where the road going down the hill there, it's a safety hazard trying to drive to work in that in the mornings when the road has just barely been cleared and it's icy. And I'm concerned about that. I've had deer over the church. I live across from the church. There are deer hanging around there, and I've seen raccoons and squirrels and when I walk my dog. And so I'm concerned with what they're doing at the wetland, because if half their lots are in the wetland, or is that they're going to be able to develop that, the people with their landscaping? Because that isn't really part of their property then, is it? Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, with that, I will close the public comment portion of this item. And I'd like Jared to come back up first, and then we'll give the applicant a chance if there's some additional things that he needs to answer. Did you take good notes, Jared?
I did. I'm going to work backwards a little bit if I can.
Okay, sure.
And I want to put... So I'm going to work backwards just a little bit and talk about density again, okay?
Yes.
So in a planned unit development, again, this is, it wasn't an approximate calculation. The density of this project is 2.8 units per acre. There are 15 lots proposed in this subdivision that you can see on the screen, in the visible area of this screen. There are 15 lots in the visible area right there. It is identical in terms of density. I know it might feel different because we're putting that same number of lots on a smaller portion of the property. But this is the full property that is being proposed for development, and it is a certain number of acres, and it is 2.8 units per acre. I can't really address that any differently. The density is not more than the area it's near. It's actually slightly less than the area that it's near. We do that for a reason, to protect the wetlands. So let me talk about the wetlands. No individual properties extend into the wetland that's designated. That is a conservation easement that's contained in a parcel. It's called Parcel C on the subdivision plat that will be owned by the Homeowners Association. No, the Homeowners Association will not be managing the wetlands. That conservation easement is for the Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers will manage the wetlands. They always have to do that. The property owners in the Spring Creek Cove subdivision will own the property through which that easement runs, but they will not manage that easement or manage the quality of that water. That'll be monitored and managed by the Corps of Engineers, the feds. I didn't just call them feds on the record. The
You're
federal
fine.
government.
You're
Thank
fine.
you. So this is broadcast, so someone will come looking for me after the meeting for
It would just be the feds,
disrespect
don't
or
worry about
whatever. So again, no individual properties, that question that got asked, no individual properties will actually extend into the wetlands themselves. They do go down the slope, but not all the way into the wetlands that are designated. There was a lot of questions about artesian wells and water on the property and flooding of existing homes that are in that subdivision, et cetera. I don't doubt that there are water issues. I'm not a hydrologic engineer. Trey's not a hydrologic engineer. The geotechnical reports and studies that will be done will have to address that.
Okay, and just for clarity, when we talk about Trey, that is the city engineer.
Thank you. Our
that
city engineer,
approves
Trey
all the engineering plans and that.
So all of those things, he'll want us. He's asked for that geotechnical study, and he's asked for it to address certain things. Those things include hydrologics, and they include the steepness of the slope and retaining walls. There may be retaining walls that are required. We're not prepared to say what those retaining walls will be right now, because we're only at the preliminary stage, which is something that I think is important to remember. The Planning Commission's task and the Planning and Zoning Department's task at this point is to assess whether or not this project should move forward from preliminary to final. We're not suggesting that we have answered every question, that we have done every study, or that the applicants have done every study or answered every question or addressed every possible contingency. The Tanner Ditch Company, there are questions and concerns. There need to be some plans made for that. But the applicants need to. We have preliminary and final, especially with a complicated subdivision like planned unit development, because the applicants have to obtain a certain level of certainty about a project before they can spend the kind of money they need to spend to answer those questions. So you're not going to see the project back in 2 weeks for final subdivision. You're going to see it back after those questions have been addressed to the satisfaction of a whole bunch of different engineers that work for a whole bunch of different departments. Go ahead, Lisa.
So I take it what you're saying as they're professionals who will look at the land and the water on the land, and then they will give them directives what they have to do to address it, and they determine if it's cost effective at that point.
Correct. So you're seeing a certain level of engineering at this point. It's not ready for final approval or plats. We haven't answered all the questions that we need to, but we don't expect them to at the preliminary subdivision level because of the costs that are associated with doing that. It may turn out that it's not feasible for them. At this point, they feel like it is and they want to move forward. That's why they have spent what they've spent and proposed what they've proposed and come to the Planning Commission for that review. There were a couple of questions about
Side yard
setbacks. So the smallest side yard setbacks, and they vary throughout the project, but in general, right in through this area, you're going to see the closest side yard setbacks, and they're 5 feet per lot, so you got 10 feet between homes. We don't go smaller than that unless if we go smaller than that, we want to just attach the buildings. That allows for fire codes to be met, et cetera, and building codes to be adhered to. So another couple of questions that got asked about, now I'm going to go back to the first part and see if I can work back through, and then there are some questions that I won't be able to answer that Jacob can speak to maybe. Plowing snow will happen exactly the way it happens throughout the rest of the city. Snow plows would go into this project, plow through, and then come back out and keep moving. So I can't say that snow won't go up onto the sidewalks or up onto the park strips of adjacent properties. That's how we plow snow. Go ahead, Sue.
I was going to say, I found that a Snicker bar and a soda got the snowplow guy to put the snow right where I needed it on my circle.
You're extremely practical.
Because I live on a cul-de-sac like these will be, and they kept putting it in front of my mailbox, and I just met him with candy and soda one day, and now it's off to the side. And, you know, they're reasonable men. It won't be any different than any other street in Murray, I'm sure.
That's exactly right.
Well, and in looking at the layout, the cul-de-sacs are where the snow always ends up.
Where it goes.
And these two cul-de-sacs have a considerable area where there is not a house fronting on each of those cul-de-sacs. That's going to be the area that they push it to, and it's going to cut down the size of the cul-de-sac until the snow melts, but that's the way it goes.
So, yeah, I would expect that.
Yeah, that's been my experience.
I get the concern about snow, and that comes up a lot, and so that's how it's going to have to be treated. You're right. Lights coming up out of the cul-de-sac, car lights coming out of the cul-de-sac, I don't know how to address that.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I live at the end of a cul-de-sac, and I just ignore the lights when, I have curtains.
Yeah.
That's what those are.
I don't know how to address it through subdivision
it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, I don't think
it's not a big deal at all.
There is a way.
Okay. More water coming in. There was some question about, we are putting more water into the wetlands, but we're actually asking the channel to contain more as well. So that problem will be looked at by those engineers. I can't speak to where it goes from there or how it is handled on the adjoining properties, and I can't do more than ask the subdivision here to address that to the best of their ability. And that, in Trey's opinion and our city engineer's opinion, is to get that channel able to handle more than it's handling right now. And that doesn't mean necessarily just to move more water than it's moving, but to contain that water while it's moving, or while it's moving through the property, to contain more volume so it doesn't rush right off of the property onto the adjoining properties, which is what it does now.
Jared, I have kind of follow up to that. So do you know, or can you talk to, downstream from this property, and or will the Corps
Corps
or
would have to
other
address that
agencies
first,
look at what the channel looks like downstream from here and potential flooding in those areas?
Yeah, they would have to look at that too. And I can't speak to it yet because some of those studies haven't been done.
Yeah, I would think
Find out
there's a
more.
county flood control permit that, you know, is one
That'll
of the
address
numerous things that they have to take care of.
Let's see. The ditch we spoke about. I know that Garbett has work to do in working with the ditch company. We want to make sure that those rights that are already existing there are protected.
That is condition 1J.
Yep. Already part of it. So we're cognizant of that, and we haven't addressed it fully yet, but it would have to be addressed before we sign off on a subdivision as a body. I wouldn't advise you otherwise.
I think overparking was one concern, and
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be different than any other neighborhood when they have a bunch of friends over.
There isn't really a reason to suspect that it would be significantly different. It is not as wide a road as some roads, but you can technically park on both sides of this road if you need to. It's not ideal. It slows down speeds, but it can be done.
And then you've had them engineer the driveways so that with the 20-foot depth, so that there's room for two cars to park side by side in the driveway, unlike some areas where the car sticks part way out into the road.
Hanging out onto the sidewalk, et cetera. That won't be an issue here. That's something that we look at very closely in these kinds of designs. And I do want to address that just in one other kind of a way. I recognize, and I think that all of us do in planning, and probably you as planning commissioners as well, and even the city engineering department, that subdivisions today are not exactly like they were 60 years ago or 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. That what sells today, what people are looking for today, has changed significantly in just the time that I've been working in city planning. I wouldn't presume to, I don't want to presume to try to tell Garbett what they think they can sell there or what they think they can sell it for. I do know that the prices for some of the homes that you'd think will shock you about what people are paying for them. But with that said, there are different styles. It doesn't feel exactly like things that people are used to. It doesn't feel exactly like the stuff that's on Wesley Road. But that's not what the market is looking for right now. That's not the market for home builders, and this is not city-owned property. We're analyzing a subdivision. And I will only advise you to look at the subdivision through that lens of what is approvable, what is appropriate at this point in time. There was some mention of development happening responsibly, and that's what we're trying to do. It's very tricky in a situation like this. There are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of factors to consider. There are a lot of people that have to do those reviews. Our part of it, as far as the planning division, is probably the easiest. We get to look at setbacks and whether we like the look of the homes and ask for more colors, et cetera. The engineering on a project like this is very, very complicated and very detailed. And Garbett is in the middle of that right now. Trey Stokes, our city engineer, felt like they were ready to come for preliminary approval, and he was ready to approve them or recommend their approval to you. Planning and zoning felt the same way, fire, the utility companies, et cetera. It doesn't mean they're ready to build tomorrow. There was a question about land being brought out, fill being brought out. There will be some impact during construction, absolutely. We try to manage that during construction to manage the going in and coming out of the property. It does impact neighborhoods. It absolutely does. We'll manage it the best we can for dust control, and stormwater pollution prevention plans have to be put in place. That's in your list of conditions as well. That means there's a gravel washout area, so they won't be tracking mud out onto Wesley Road. You probably haven't seen a lot of subdivision in this area for a long time. We are significantly better as municipalities about managing that kind of construction than we were years ago, I think anyway.
Including the quality of the project and the engineering that goes into it and the water management that goes into it.
Right.
The standards are much higher now than they were
they are
40, 50, 60 years ago.
Those issues that weren't addressed well when some of the homes in the area were built should be addressed better now. And that's why we have these kind of meetings and do the kind of engineering that we need to do. I want to think that I've got all of those other than things that I can't address as well as Jacob might be able to.
Let me ask one more, Jared. You talked about it a little earlier, but there were several comments about potentially making this into a park and or the property to the south of this development. Can you just touch on that again briefly?
Yeah. So we have actually looked at the property in terms of parks, and Zach is actually working as a member of our staff on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that's being redone right now. There is a need for parks in the area. This isn't land that we can use to fill that need. We'll keep on looking, and I know that they have those plans are being made. It was mentioned that they're going to be adopting that plan soon. We've often considered in planning and zoning how much we need parks throughout different neighborhoods in the city. That has not been a focus, especially in county land that was incorporated or annexed in the last 20 years for people to be able to get to. We look at a 10-minute walk shed. You don't have that here other than the school that was mentioned. There is some open space, but it's not ideal. We're not opposed to providing that. This particular property is too expensive for that. There was another property mentioned closer to the church. You all, as a commission, approved a subdivision on that property not too long ago. It was a simple lot split, flag lot, the giant lots. I'm trying to recall right now if that's been recorded as a subdivision yet. I believe that it has, but I could be wrong. We'd have to check that out. I don't know if that property is available and what it costs. It's not in my purview to look at that. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan is ready for adoption, deals with this area, but not in terms of looking at those properties as potential parks, mainly due to costs.
Yeah, Jared and Ned, I would like to address that. You know, there is opportunity for citizens to become involved with. Everybody wants more parks, and it is especially critical in the area east of Murray that was, I like to say recently annexed, even though it's probably been 15 years. The county, that was just county land that, you didn't get a lot of services. You didn't get a lot of planning. And when Murray annexed that, what we had was basically built out, or the easy stuff has all been built on. So parks for that area, it's very difficult to buy the property. It's very difficult to develop an appropriate park in the appropriate place. And for the last year and a half, Murray City has been conducting a Parks and Recreation Master Plan review. They have a master plan that they look at approximately, I think, every 10 to 15 years. It has been a considerable time since they looked at this particular one. It would have been very helpful if people in your neighborhood could have been a part of that discussion and that planning a year and a half ago. They are at the point right now where they have scheduled a final adoption meeting. I think it's within a couple of weeks. And to be very honest with you, they're not going to throw the master plan out that has had all of this study for the last year and a half and all of a sudden consider a vacant piece of property like this, even though it would be awesome for a park. The cost, the logistics involved, and just the financial planning, the long-term financial planning of the city, it's not going to allow that. So, I would love to see it as well, but it really is not realistic at this time.
That's a good point. Thanks.
Jared, can I ask you a question? It
Sure.
might be a question more appropriate for Jacob. We'll see. And you, I feel, have kind of touched on it, but still, there's been a lot of discussion about lowering the property, dragging out the property 6 feet, which we had not heard of before.
I can't really speak
That's
to that.
engineering.
I would throw
You,
that for.
I think you suggested that's going to be engineering, and they'll address
Talk
the
about
water.
how that works with the engineering that's been done or what's being looked at. I would have to defer to him. I don't know about
It
that.
seems like we should let the applicant address
Yes.
whatever he wants to, and then
Yeah, if Jared
Maybe
would sit
that'll-
down, we would invite Mr. Garbett to come up.
I won't
Okay.
get. I promise you I won't get up again, too. I can do that.
One quick comment I wanted to address. One of the comments was about the wildlife that's in the area. And as most of you know, I live really near the parkway. And as Ivory's been building their homes, I haven't particularly noticed a real downfall or lessening of the amount of wildlife that's in the area. I would have appreciated if the skunk that comes into my backyard would have found other quarters, but it doesn't seem to have that big of an impact on the wildlife in the channel, because they have their established routes that they go in, and once they get used to that, they pretty much stay with that. So we still have the deer in the parkway, we still have skunks, we still have raccoons, all those things are still there. We still get beautiful big birds, and I think that at one meeting we had a fellow that lives right by Phil brought a picture of a coyote that still hangs out on the parkway. So I don't think you're going to necessarily see a big lessening over time of the wildlife in that area, thank goodness, because the wetlands are, according to this plan, are scheduled to be preserved by the Corps of Engineers. They're very much desirous that we keep that pristine wetland established the way it is. And the best thing about this is that they're going to require improvement of it by dredging of the stream bed to get rid of the debris that's down there. So, I mean, for me, when I look at the reports and things that we've had, it's a win-win as far as the wetlands go, because it's been very well thought out.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that, and I'll sit down like I promised and let Jacob come up. But
Thank you.
You're exactly right. Thank you.
Mr. Garbett?
Actually, it's
Ballstead.
Ballstead, I'm sorry. Yeah. That's only 2 names I've messed up tonight, so that's not bad.
Mr. Garbett's a good man. I'm happy to be mistaken for him. So, I'd just like to make a couple comments. First, I've been in a lot of planning commission meetings, and I have to applaud the process here. I actually like how Jared was able to address a lot of the questions from the neighbors. I haven't been in a meeting where that's happened before. It's really functional. So, good job on that process. The other thing I'd like to say is on February 22nd, we had a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors at the Murray Library. We talked about the plan, and we had a good showing there. We probably had 20 or so people there. Many of the people that have commented here tonight were at that meeting. And I want to say that I appreciate their respectfulness. I'm glad that they made comments. They were kind, professional, but sincere in expressing their concerns about what we were doing. And I want to express to the commission and to the neighbors that we're doing our best to hear them and are sincerely trying to address the concerns that they have. So,
Mr. Ballstead, could you give me a reasonable timeline for the project? Do you have any idea, anything to base it on?
Well, I think we'll probably be another 3 months or so before we get final plat. There is quite a bit of work to do as far as the Army Corps of Engineers is concerned. I think my goal is to have asphalt before winter.
You have a ditch company permit that you will need to secure before that goes forward as well.
That is on my list to talk about before I sit down. Yeah. No, there's a lot to do. So, but my goal is to have asphalt the end of this year, before winter this year.
Okay.
Do you mind if I address a couple of questions from
Please do.
neighbors?
Please.
Then I can address
Yes.
comments from the commission. So I made notes, and I'll just do my best to not be redundant, but address some of the things that were come up. One of the comments came about truckloads of dirt. So the way we've designed the plan, we've intentionally tried to minimize the impact on the site. Previous developers had homes and retaining and significant grading going all the way down to the creek and even filling part of the wetlands there. We've intentionally stayed out of the wetlands and kept the houses further up on the hill to minimize the impact on the wetlands in those sensitive areas. We are coming down. I don't know how to use your thing. So if you can, oh boy, I'm not sure how to use this. So there's been some comments about a 6-foot drop. So when you start on Wesley Road, and then as you come to Wild Spice Cove, that elevation drops about 6 feet. And the intention of doing that is to bring that shelf down to minimize the amount of slope and the amount of export that we would have to have, or excuse me, the amount of import that we'd have to make the development work. There likely could be some retaining there. If there is retaining that's required, it'll likely be on the cul-de-sacs. I think it'll be minimal, a foot or two at the max. We still need to better understand those details. Most of that slope is pretty gradual. I mean, we take up 6 feet over 100 feet of 6 feet of grade over 100 foot of street, and but if there is retaining that's required, we'll do it, and we'll do it right. There's a lot of comments about protecting the wetlands and the natural resources there and the animals, and I think Jared did a good job addressing it. And I think that neighbors have a legitimate concern. Wildlife has enjoyed this property for forever, and I think the benefit of what we're proposing as a PUD is that we can develop this site, cluster the homes up on the bench, and then deliver nearly 1.5 acres of open space that will be maintained as open space where wildlife can still use it, people can go down there and use it, and do our best to preserve the open space that's there. Jared did a great job addressing the density. We are planning on having an HOA because the streets are dedicated, they won't worry about the streets. Really, all they're going to be doing is maintaining the open spaces at the entrance. They'll be responsible for making sure the filtration system for the storm water that discharges into the creek is cleaned and maintained, and things of that nature. So their role is vital, but and they are a professional management company. We've worked with them for over a decade. They manage nearly 8,000 doors. They're well qualified and can handle these type of things.
So, Mr. Balsek, can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So the HOA is going to hire a separate company to maintain the filter.
Yeah.
Someone who has expertise, someone who understands what they're doing. So it's not a matter of, each of these houses taking a week where they have to go down and check the filter and make sure that it's running properly, and then, okay, it's your week. Oh, you were out of town, you missed the filter.
Right.
So it's professionals that are doing it, and the HOA is paying for it and hiring it out, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
There was a comment about the storm drain potentially from Wesley Road coming into this and discharging through our storm drain. All the storm drain on Wesley Road will stay on Wesley Road. We're not picking up any of that water. The only water that we'll be collecting and discharging down to the creek is water that's collected on our new roads.
So there'll be a waterway at the top of your
right
of Wild Spice and Wesley. There'll be a waterway that conveys it across there.
Yeah, there's a curb and gutter now that we'll maintain. We'll maintain a waterway crossing Wild Spice Lane, so it stays.
Okay.
Max Reese with the Tanner Ditch Company made some comments, and I just want to address that. When we entered a contract to purchase a property last summer, I was given a copy of an agreement that the ditch company entered into with the previous property owners, and it detailed just how the ditch would have to be enclosed and maintained, and specific terms with the ditch company. And I had a brief conversation with Max at that time. During that last 6 months, we've been working on trying to figure out how we're going to design this site. It's a challenging site, how we're going to make the ditch work, how we're going to make everything work. And then I had a neighborhood meeting on February 22nd. I was not prepared at that meeting to visit with Max. I was just having it with neighbors. I wasn't trying to exclude him. Right after that, I went out of town. I tried to reach him this week. So long story short is, it's my intention to make sure that the ditch works. It's my intention to make sure that the people that currently use the ditch to have water will continue to use that water. We have every intention to work with Max and the neighbors to get it right and make sure it works well. So, and I'm confident we can do that.
And if I can expand on that, as Commissioner Ney said, Condition J says that you will. So not only a matter of intention, because intention's wonderful, but this says you will do it and you will receive that approval. So it's a little stronger than just, we want to sit down and talk, but it's actually a requirement of the development.
Very true. And they've got an easement on our property. We couldn't do it. I mean, even if that condition wasn't there, we can't do anything of that ditch without getting their approval. So there's been quite a bit of discussion about water table. There was a geotechnical study performed by the previous developers. Several boreholes were dug up to 50, 60 feet deep. I think the shallowest water table we found on the top of the shelf was 15 feet. There may be some more testing that needs to be done. If there's water table that's encountered, we'll take the recommendation of our geotechnical engineers and address it as they recommend. But from our findings, there hasn't been issues. If there's artesian wells on the site, I have no knowledge of them. It's not to say they're not there. I just don't know about them.
Well, water tables do tend to change from year to year as well. So,
And as you put in storm drain and pipes in the ground, they tend to dewater a site to some extent as well.
True.
There was a lot of questions about parking. I think that Jared addressed that well. The one thing I may add to that is that there's a lot of space on this subdivision on the roads where there's no houses. And if there was a party, I think there's lots of areas to park in this subdivision on the streets where there's no houses or where it's not going to block driveways or anything of that nature. There were some comments about the ejection pumps. So we have to sewer the property to Wesley Road, but the houses, we're far enough away from Wesley that we can't gravity flow the basements. So the main floor and any second story of the houses will gravity flow through our sewer system into the sewer in Wesley Road. We will have ejection pumps in the basement. So if somebody finishes their basement and has a bathroom down there, or for the condensation line for the heating system, that ejection pumps will take that water to the upper floor. From there, it'll gravity flow to the street and down Wesley Road. It's a system we've used in the past. We have a dozen or two homes that we've used similar systems in our Wynwood subdivision on 7th West. I think that I've tried to address most of the comments that were there. I may have missed some. If I have, I apologize. But I can address them off later with the homeowners. If not, I'm happy to address any questions from the commission.
So, Mr. Balsa, thank you for your answers, and it helped me a little bit more to understand why maybe you've done the density the way you have. Because I certainly can understand the residents. The perception is that it is a higher density because they are closer. They're closer to the road, and compared to what the neighborhoods are around there, it would appear to be more dense. And the reality is they are a little bit more dense in terms of next to each other. Now, per acre, it's actually less.
Right.
But if I understand correctly, part of your goal for this property, because there's been other people that have looked at this, and part of your goal was to say, how can we preserve as much of the wetlands and the wildlife as possible and still make it a viable project in terms of the homes. Whereas other developers would go in and maybe fill it in more, as you said, fill in some of the wetlands and maybe make, the houses a little farther apart, but it comes at the expense of the wetlands.
Right.
So is that kind of part of the goal? Okay.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understood, because as we've seen, Phil and I have been on this commission for 9 years now, and we've seen other people come through, and that's what I remember the last applicants were more like, a little broader to try to, so that they would look less dense, but it would be more to the expense of the wetlands. So thank you for that, and hopefully that balance will be something that will be appreciated, because the reality is every one of us know that, wetlands are going away, wildlife space is going away throughout the whole community, and the housing needs, that's the place we live.
Yeah.
If you want wildlife and you want those things and you want it in abundance, then Salt Lake County is not the place to be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So anyway, just thanks for helping me understand that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then just one other comment. Are you, is there anything you're going to be able to do that could help mitigate any of that flooding that the current residents are experiencing? Is that water that's coming from this property? Or I know there was a lot of people that mentioned their basements are flooding. Is there anything you're going to do that's going to be able to mitigate that?
I don't know about the basement flooding. There's been some comments about it. I don't know which houses they were or what's causing it. I have a feeling that that the open ditch there likely raises the water table in the area. I think once we enclose it, I think that could improve it. I think as you put pipes in the ground and gravel systems, it'll help dewater the site. I think what we're doing, if anything, will help improve water tables in the area.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just missed. After the meeting, Max, you're more than welcome to talk with him, and we can get it taken care of. We do have to continue along a certain agenda path. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions from commission members for Mr. Ballstead? Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate you being here tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Discussion from council members. I'm open for any additional comments from you folks, or if we see fit, I will entertain a motion.
I can just make one more comment.
Sure, absolutely.
And just really quickly, I appreciate the residents coming and expressing the concerns. And one of the great things about this two-stage process is that the applicant was here to be able to hear the comments and the concerns. It's also been recorded, and there will be minutes. And so there will be a record of all the concerns and all the comments mentioned about this development. And these will be things, as the applicant said, over the next 3 months as they're working on the Corps of Engineers things and working with the ditch company and all the different aspects of these conditions. They'll also be able to factor in, the comments that were expressed here. We've seen that in other developments where when the final subdivision plan comes back, it does reflect some of those comments. So thank you for coming. Thank you for making the comments, and understand that it is always a balance between the rights of a landowner and people that live around that land. And I think the staff does an excellent job trying to mitigate those things. And one thing I can say about developers that come into Murray is I think they genuinely understand about Murray community pride, and they want to be here and they want to make something nice. I don't know that that's always the case, but I've seen that here in maybe in other cities. But in Murray, I feel like that is the case. So thank you for your efforts, and thank you for coming and making your opinions known.
Before we have a motion, I would like to just say a couple of things as well to council members, commission members. I see a great benefit in this project at this point. I cannot make a motion, but as you're considering whether you want to make one or not, I don't think we've touched on the fact that the property right now is an eyesore. It's a horrible mess. Before the buildings were removed that were there were drug houses, basically. It's a dumping ground, and wildlife has tried to make the best of it, but I think we can do better than that. And I think that anytime we have change in established neighborhoods, it's a little bit scary. My neighborhood has seen 100 houses go into an area that was just fields for the last 200 years. The radio towers came down and Ivory Homes came up. And to be very honest with you, I couldn't be more pleased. There was trepidation on my part, but I think it's been a wonderful addition to my neighborhood, and even the traffic concerns that I had have not surfaced. So, I know that these are always emotional for longtime neighbors, and I love that they love their neighborhood, and that's why we want to make sure we do this right. And it's important to remember that this is preliminary, and before there is a final approval given for this project, if it is given final approval, all of these questions will have to be answered to the satisfaction of this commission. And I look forward to seeing how Garbett Homes deals with these issues, because they are large and they're complex, and 3 other people have tried to solve it, and apparently they haven't been able to. So let's let the process play out and hopefully have something wonderful.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit to allow the proposed Spring Creek Cove PUD subdivision, which is at the 5091 South Wesley Road and 5070 South 1100 East. And that's subject to conditions 1 through 6.
Okay.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Scott Woodbury, a second by Maren Patterson, that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit to allow the proposed Spring Creek Cove PUD subdivision, subject to conditions 1 through 6. Call for vote, please.
Mr. Woodbury.
Yes.
Ms. Patterson.
Yes.
Mr. Ney.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Ms. Okavich.
Yes.
Mr. Hacker.
Yes.
Mr. Markham.
Yes. You could have screwed up my name, and it would have been fair.
Almost called him Mr. Markham.
That's okay. All right. Second on the agenda now, we have heard the presentation, and we have before us a recommendation for action on on granting preliminary subdivision approval.
Mr. Chairman, before I make a motion, I'd like to say that I also am a big proponent to open space parks within Murray. Murray has a lot of nice parks. They could certainly use more. I think the property to the south of this, we heard a little bit about it. The neighborhood knows the property, and that part of the issue with parks is having budget to take care of them and just to have budget to purchase the property. But I hear you, and I have fought myself for more parks in Murray and have been only slightly successful in that endeavor. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that the Planning Commission grant preliminary approval for the proposed Spring Creek Cove PUD subdivision, subject to the following conditions 1 through 6.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion by Ned Hacker, a second by Lisa Mokevich, that the Planning Commission grant preliminary approval for the proposed Spring Creek Cove PUD subdivision, subject to conditions 1 through 6 as presented tonight.
Yes.
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 Commissioner Woodbury.
Yes.
Commissioner Patterson.
Yes.
Commissioner Ney.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. And that is all we have on our agenda, our official agenda. Does staff have any additional items they'd like to address?
I don't believe that we do.
Wow. Okay.
That's rare for us, but I don't believe
All right. Well, we know what comes next. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.